always funny. We start worship. I sit down, and there's like 3 people here. And then we get up. Oh, everyone's here now. I always want to be honest with you guys, even when we deal with like topics that aren't always fun. This morning's not a real fun topic for me. I think it's challenging, mainly because I suck at a lot of it, at least my understanding of it. And so I wrestle through it, if that makes sense. And so I want you guys to kind of bear with me. I've had a rough week. I've been wrestling through this idea of success. What does being successful look like? What is success? And I find that real difficult at times. I don't worry about me being successful or not, because oftentimes what happens is you look at someone's life and you go, that person is successful, and really if you were to talk to that person, they'd probably say they're not, right? And so success isn't really so much something that we find ourselves in, but what we find in someone else, right? Success is defined in Webster's dictionary as a desired effect or outcome. But what if the outcome, right, that we're pursuing in life isn't truly what we desire, right? Maybe it's not our desire. Maybe it's the desires of our family, the desire of our friends, a coworker, a boss, even the church, right? What happens when the measure of success has been given to us by somebody else? And then I think, do you ever feel like you're just chasing success and you can't really get there? Like even when you grab it, you have it, right? It's just kind of fleeting. And even if you do get hold of it, you're like, it's really not what I thought it was going to be. It doesn't fulfill the way that we thought it would. Success, I think, is something that is a passion, not only for our generation, but every generation that has ever lived. We want to be successful. There's entire companies, their whole job is just to be successful, to motivate other people to be successful. Remember the posters we had in our insurance company, Michael? The motivational ones, you know, one guy on top of a mountain, he's pulling the other guy up, and then underneath it says, teamwork makes the dream work, right? Corny things like that. I don't think I've ever met somebody who says that they don't want to be successful, whether it's in life or in business and family and relationships. I think we all want to have some kind of measure of success. And the Bible actually is going to talk a lot about success. It really does, specifically in the middle of the Old Testament. In the middle of the Old Testament, we find these 5 books. They're called the wisdom literature, okay? Most people, if they tell you they have a favorite verse in the Bible, it's going to come from one of those 5 books, okay? Those books are going to be Job, Psalms, Proverbs, Song of Songs, and Ecclesiastes. Those 5 books make up what we call the wisdom literature. And people who read the scriptures, they really like those books because those books aren't so historical like a lot of the Bible. So it doesn't really say like this battle happened here and this many people died. They're more narratives. They're more narratives about people's lives. And the people that they talk about, they're really human people. They're really easy for us to relate to. And so we can resonate when they do well and when they struggle. We can resonate in their joy and in their sorrow. I think most of the people that are exemplified that we talk about in these books, they're just very human. So for us, we look at them, we go, okay, I get that. I can follow with that. All right. Each one of these books that make up these 5 books have their own purpose. So Proverbs is really how you find success, right? If you want to be successful in life as a businessman or as a father, as a wife or a housemaker or a businesswoman, wherever you find yourself on that scale, if you want to find success, Proverbs is kind of that field guide of how to do it. It will address everything from money to relationships, right, to character. Okay, so Proverbs would be that book. Psalms is fun. Psalms is a book written by a schizophrenic king called David, right? And I call him schizophrenic because in one line he'll say, how long, O Lord, will you just forsake me? And then 2 lines later he says, oh, how great it is that you're so near me, right? But I don't know about you guys, but my soul resonates with that. I mean, it does. I don't flutter around all day in Shekinah glory. I resonate with David because even when he's arguing with himself within the book, right? And everyone who's been a Christian, who's walked this path, knows that at times there's this big chasm between what the heart knows and what the head's walking in, right? Like we're just all, And David says that here when he says, why are you so downcast, O my soul? Put your hope in God. It's like he's trying to give himself a pep talk. I have to do it all the time. Like he knows what's the right thing, but his heart just won't join him there. Does anyone feel that way? A couple of us? Okay, then we have the Song of Songs, and that's a great book. It is a great book about sex and the celebration of sex. It's pretty graphic. Most Hebrew boys aren't allowed to read it till they get a little bit older. It's pretty graphic. But it's all about the celebration of sexuality. So you have that book, and then you're left with two other books. You have Job and you have Ecclesiastes, and they basically are one lesson kind of formed from two sides, opposite ends of the spectrum. Okay? If you're not familiar with the story of Job, I'll tell you real quick. The accuser, Satan, right? He walks into heaven. He basically goes up to God and he says, hey, I've been hanging around all over the earth, seeing the people that you made. Man, these guys are lame. Seriously, that's the best you got? And what does God say? He says, well, have you considered Job? What about my boy Job? I think if Job heard them, he'd be like, dude, leave me out of this. But God says, have you considered Job? And the accuser says, give me a break, man. You've so blessed that guy. You've made him so wealthy, and he is untouchable to us. And I like that line. I really do, because for me, I think a lot of us in the church, we ascribe this dualistic nature to God and Satan, right? Like God's over here and Satan's over here. They're equally powerful. One's good, one's evil. Not the case. In fact, what's going to happen here, what happens to Job requires God to say, okay. All right? So that's a hard thing to wrestle with, right? Remember in the New Testament when Peter gets tempted by Satan? Jesus tells him, Satan came to me and asked permission to tempt you. And I said, okay. Man. So there isn't this like cataclysmic good versus evil. There's this little runt pawn that comes up and he goes, can I bother him? And God goes, sure, why not? So the accuser walks in and he goes, all right, these guys are bums. And God says, well, consider Job. Job's great. And he goes, give me a break, man. You put a hedge of protection around that guy so much, right? But I'll tell you what, if you let me hurt him, you let me strike him, you let me have my hands on this guy, and he'll curse your name. And so God thought about it for a second, as only God could do, and he goes, all right, do it. Go ahead. And then these series of events unfold in Job's life, right, that turn it into the first country song ever recorded, right? He walks in the garden in the cool of the day. Sounds familiar? And a servant runs up to him and he goes, the Sabaeans, they've raided. They killed all your donkeys and all your oxen. All your servants are dead except for me. I'm the only one that survived. And then before he even finishes saying what happened, it says another servant runs up, and that servant comes and he says, fire, stuff just started falling from the sky, and they burned up all your sheep, killed all your servants, and I'm the only one that's left. Like, look, when people steal your stuff, that's not good, right? But if things are falling from the sky and burning your property, that's a bad day. That's a bad day. But it says before he's even done, another servant comes up and he says, the Chaldeans, they raided from the east and they took all your camels, they killed all your servants. And then before he's done, another one comes up and he goes, all your kids were at your oldest son's house. They're all having lunch, and a wind hit the house and it collapsed and it fell and everyone's dead. And the scriptures say at this, Job tore his clothes and began to worship God. And you get that line, he says, naked I have come from my mother's womb, naked I shall return. The Lord has given and the Lord has taken away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. Which is beautiful, but it just infuriates his wife, right? Because look, all this destruction happens. She goes the bitter route, right? He's kind of like, oh, this is all yours anyways, right? So she comes in after this horrible day, and she's like, are you still holding on to your integrity? Curse God and die, you fool. And what does it say? He gets on his knees and he begs God. He says, just give me back the camel, take the woman. No, it doesn't say that. It doesn't? No, it doesn't. It doesn't read like that. You got to think it crosses mine though, right? Satan comes, he goes, look. Because God tells him, hey, you didn't crack him. And he goes, well, you let me touch his health. I mean, he still has his health. You let me get his health, and he's going to curse you for sure. And God says, okay, go ahead. And so the Bible says the devil strikes him with boils. And Job sits in ashes, completely poor, dogs licking his wounds. And it says he arrives at the end of all this by saying, we have no hope on earth. Our only hope is beyond the sun. Now, most people who've had Job-like experiences, and I don't think many of us have had that day or that life, but for those of us who have suffered, for those of us who don't have a lot of money, right, for those of us who have had diseases, right, What ends up happening is we're like, well, if life wasn't like this, if life was just this way, right? If only I had this, if I had more money or better religion or more friends, then things would be better, right? And we tell ourselves, if I was, my parents weren't so mean, maybe then if I could just get this. And what happens is we create in our minds this existence, this better existence that exists somewhere over the rainbow, right? Are you guys following what I'm saying? The problem with thinking that way really is thinking that we could find success in this world, right? Thinking we could find some kind of fulfillment in this world. That's the problem, and Ecclesiastes is going to address that, so I want to go there real quick. We'll spend some time. I just want to kind of chat through it. Okay, Ecclesiastes 1:1. It says the words of the preacher. It could be teacher, interpreted the same way. The point of this is this person really wants to share something that they've learned. They want to teach us something. Okay, so 1:1. The words of the preacher, the son of David, king in Jerusalem. Okay, so who is this? Solomon, right? This is Solomon. This man is the king of a very prosperous, very wealthy, very powerful nation. Okay? In other words, he's got more money, more wealth, more power than any of us will ever have. He's been more educated. From the second he was born, he has had privilege and tutors in how life works. So he is well beyond us in means of just power, understanding, education, resources. Okay. This is what he says. Verse 2. Vanity of vanities, says the preacher. Vanity of vanities. Okay, this word, vanity, is a Hebrew word which is just meaningless. So this is his real chipper introduction, right? Meaningless, meaningless, meaningless. Everything's meaningless. That's what he's saying. Now, for us, I think we can look at life and go, yeah, there's aspects of life that seem pretty meaningless at times, right? But Solomon takes it a step further. Look what he does. He's going to tell you exactly what's meaningless. Look at the end of verse 2. What does he say? All is vanity. What a Debbie Downer, man. Everything? I mean, something's got to have some value, right? And everything's meaningless? Solomon says everything. Wait, marriage? Meaningless. Pleasure? Meaningless. Wealth? Meaningless. He says everything under the sun that is meaningless. I'm sorry, I read this, I kind of laugh because I'm like, man, this guy's just going through a hard time. But this is what happens if you read the rest of the book. He's going to go through and methodically for the next 12 chapters, he's going to talk about every aspect of living, and then he's going to ascribe to it its worthlessness, that in the end, none of it matters. In fact, in 12 chapters, he's going to use the word meaningless 38 times. 38 times in 12 chapters. Do the math. That's a lot, right? So everything's meaningless. All right, why? Why is everything meaningless? All right, let's look at verse 3. He says, what does man gain by all the toil at which he toils under the sun? Why is life meaningless? Because regardless of whether you get up at 5 o'clock in the morning or you sleep in until noon, right? What you do, no matter what you do, at some point you're going to die and nothing's going to change. That's what he's saying. There's a philosophy called empiricism. It's this idea that the only things that matter are on earth here, and we can take them in with our senses, right? So sight, hearing, taste, smell, touch, those things. And so the only things that matter are the things that are real, that can be touched and handled and taken in by the senses. But Jesus would say that we as believers, we have a sixth sense, right? We'll get into that. But he says, look at verse 4. Solomon tells us, okay, recap real quick. Solomon's telling us everything's meaningless because we're going to die and we're not going to change anything. I didn't say that. That's what he said. Okay. Verse 4. A generation goes and a generation comes, but the earth remains forever. The sun rises and the sun goes down and hastens to the place where it rises. The wind blows to the south and goes around to the north. Around and around goes the wind, and on its circuits the wind returns. All streams run to the sea, but the sea is not full. To the place where the streams flow, there they flow again. What he's saying is life is basically just a treadmill, right? We're caught in this circular silliness of life that some of it just doesn't seem to matter, right? We get caught up in this. And look, every generation that's ever lived, that's ever been before us or will come after us, every generation wants to be successful, and they run with all the vigor of a sweaty guy on a treadmill at the gym. And in the end, they haven't gone anywhere. They're a little sweatier. Heart rate might be better. but they really haven't gone anywhere. And what he's saying is just like the sun does the same thing every day, goes up and comes down, the moon does the same thing every day, just like the streams in the oceans, he goes, nature testifies that life is just kind of a routine. Is it not? And he says, as a result, we kind of find ourselves in this circular silliness of life, finding what's the point? The problem is, look, here's the reality. No matter how hard you work, what? There's always laundry. Always laundry. Right? No matter how much you clean it, it's going to get dirty again. You mow the lawn on Monday, you got to mow it again. I just got my hair cut 3 weeks ago. I had to cut it again. It grows back. Bills, constantly, right? And this is what he's saying. He goes, listen, all of this is just exhausting because none of it matters. None of it matters. All right, verse 8. He says, all things are full of weariness. A man cannot utter it. The eye is not satisfied with seeing, nor the ear filled with hearing. So he's talking about this non-satisfying existence that we find ourselves in, this weird pattern of circular behavior that we find ourselves in. Because he said, and it never fills ourselves, right? I'll give you an example. Tomorrow, this is what happens. We'll get up, we'll all work whatever program we have, right? The alarm will go off, we'll wake up, we'll get in the shower, we'll get caffeinated, right? We'll get off to work, we'll go to our workstation, our office, or shop, whatever. We'll spend our day, we'll have lunch. We might even have lunch with friends if we have any at work. And then we'll go back to work. We'll work until whatever time we're done. We'll get off. We'll think about going to the gym. We probably won't. We'll go home. We'll eat dinner. We'll watch some TV shows. And then we'll go to bed. And guess what you're going to do on Tuesday? The same thing. It just repeats. Life is more like that weird movie Groundhog Day than any of us really want to admit. It just is constantly rinse and repeat, rinse and repeat, rinse and repeat. But there are people, and at times I can be one of them, maybe you can too, that we try to pretend that our lives aren't in this predictable rut, this circular pattern. And so what we do is this. Look at verse 9. He says, what has been is what will be, and what has been done is what will be done. There's nothing new under the sun. He said, is there a thing of which it is said, see, this is new? It's already been in the ages before us. Okay, what he's telling us is people like to pretend that their lives aren't meaningless and they're not stuck in this circular rut of boredom by getting trinkets and acting like they're new things. And they're not. He goes, at the end of the day, they may have more color, they may be bigger, but they're not new, they're just trinkets. I think part of the problem that we have, because we focus so much down here, that these little things that we get are great distractions from just the routine of life. Look, if we're honest, and I'm not pretending that any of us are, but I think if we're honest, we've seen this play out. How many times have you gotten a new phone or a new shirt or a new car, and you just feel better, don't you? Like, it has some weird emotional effect on you. Just having those new things, you're like, oh, it just makes it better. You almost want to show it off. Get a new car. You just want to cruise around town, right? Have other people see it. Why is that? What isn't that weird? I think about it all the time. It's weird to me. It's like this validates me somehow, whatever it is, right? And the scriptures are saying, just give me a break, man. Trinkets are trinkets. They're nothing new. I was watching a show on ancient Egypt years ago, and I remember I was laughing because they were looking at hieroglyphs, and at one of the ancient colleges in ancient Egypt, they found hieroglyphs that a professor wrote, and basically what he said was, all my students do is carouse and drink beer all day. So he's saying there's nothing new. Nothing's changed. And I think one of the biggest dangers to depth and meaning is trinkets. New cars, new homes, new wives, new husbands, new anything. He says there's nothing new under the sun. You might have heard it like this, recovery, they'll say wherever you go, there you are, right? So what that means is no change of work, no change of job, no change of income. Nothing you do is going to change what's inside of you. And that's what Solomon's lamenting. Look at verse 11. He says, there's no remembrance of former things, nor will there be any remembrance of later things yet to be among those who come after. So Solomon's saying, okay, you're going to die and no one's going to remember you. Right? Anyone here know their great-great-great-great-grandfather's name? Anyone else know their great-great-great-grandfather's name? One person. Exactly proved my point. We're all like 60 years away from being completely forgotten once we die. That's a scary thought, but that's the reality. Sorry for that. Let's move on. Such a chipper message today, Daniel. Thanks for this. Verse 12, I, the preacher, have been king over Israel and Jerusalem, and I applied my heart to seek and to search out by wisdom all that is done under heaven. Okay, what he's saying is, look, me, the king, with all the resources and everything that I've learned. And remember, this is Solomon. So when David died, God went to Solomon and said, I'll give you anything you want. What do you want? And what did Solomon ask for? Wisdom, right? He didn't want power. He didn't want wealth. He said, I want to be the wisest man in the world, because he wanted to govern people properly. And God said, hey, that's a great idea. He thought it was an honorable request. So he gave him wisdom, but he also gave him wealth and power. So this is what he's saying. I, King Solomon, wealthy, wise, powerful Solomon, I'm going to set out and discover all that is occurring under heaven, right? So he's going to use all of his senses, his 5 senses, to reach out and to see if there's anything of value in this world. All the things that you and I pursue, all the things that we try to find satisfaction or success in, he says, I'm going to go pursue those things. These are the things: wealth, power, religion, friends, work, pleasure. So Solomon uses his 5 senses, engages in those things. It's kind of a life experiment, right? To really see what's going on under the sun. And he's going to test everything that we pursue, and then he's going to come back and he's going to tell us if there's any value to any of it. And in the end, he says it's all meaningless. It's absolutely meaningless. Okay, verse 16. I said in my heart, I have acquired great wisdom, surpassing all who were over Jerusalem before me. And my heart has had great experience of wisdom and knowledge. He's saying, look, just trust me in this. I'm smarter than you. I have more money and more power than you. Okay. And then verse 7, he says, I applied my heart to know wisdom and to know madness and folly. I perceived that this also is but striving after the wind. Okay. This is what he said he did. So when I first started pursuing the things of God, when I first did, what I did was I went super highbrow. He's like, I did. I marbled everything. I encrusted it in gold. I chased after caviar, and we had champagne. I went and played polo, not water polo, but like, right? He started a show called Lifestyles of the Rich and Famous. He did all of that stuff, and he said, I acquired all the stuff. I did all the things the rich people do. And at the very end of all of that, he's like, it didn't matter. It just was pointless. So he's like, so then I looked down and I saw some redneck brothers of mine, and I was like, I'll hang out with these guys for a little bit. And he's like, and I did, and we burned stuff, and we drank Old Milwaukee, we went to NASCAR races. He's like, dude, it was fun. We played cornhole, right? Mac and cheese and chili mixed together in a pot. But he said, and all that was pointless too. None of that mattered. And it's funny, because look at what he's attacking here. Because what ends up happening, if you're more wealthy, you look at people that have it a little easier and you go, man, if only life was a little simpler, right? If I wasn't so stressed out, if life could just be a little bit simpler. And then people that don't have money, they look at the wealthy and they go, oh man, if only I had a little bit of that money, my life would be so much better, right? And what's Solomon saying? He's like, listen, I lived the wealthy life, and simplicity is not the answer. And then he's like, and I went the other way, and I was broke. I had nothing. Trust me, I was simple, and that wasn't the answer either. All right. After this, you're probably going, man, Daniel, I thought the church was supposed to provide some kind of hope. There's something happening here, okay? And listen, until we're really honest and we're ready to evaluate life under the sun and see if there's really any meaning there for us in there or not for us in there, until we're willing to do that, we're just stuck on a treadmill. Until we can slow down and come to the same conclusion that Solomon did, that life has no meaning, that there's nothing in it, then we can begin to develop that sixth sense, that other sense of faith that we as Christians have. And now we can ascribe meaning and find joy in things under the sun, instead of trying to find life in them. Faith is what gives us the power to take things beyond. Not just focus on what's under here, but faith gives us the ability to see beyond the sun. Okay, everybody here and everybody in the world knows something's wrong. Like something's broken in this world. From our perspective as Christians, what we would say is that when the fall sin entered into the world, there was a fracture that took place. The best way that I could describe sin to you, and this comes from a philosopher, Soren Kierkegaard, but he's kind of a weirdo, but some of his stuff is good. But he says this in regards to sin. He said, sin is building your self-worth on anything other than God. You guys get that? Sin is building your self-worth on anything other than God. Because when you take a good thing, and remember the things we talked about, religion, power, wealth, pleasure, friends, work, all of those are good things. They're not intrinsically evil. Those are good things. The problem is when we take something that is a good thing and we try to make it an ultimate thing, we make it a God thing. When we do that, we're almost guaranteed to have that thing bury us. Does that make sense? Does anyone understand what I'm saying? When we take something that is meant to be just a good thing and we make it an ultimate thing, that thing will literally ruin our lives. So what happens is when sin entered the world, it fractures. Romans 1 says that what happened is that you and I, we exchanged the Creator God for His creation. And then what ends up happening, what takes place is we begin to settle for temporary and fleeting things rather than what's eternal and soul satisfying. I'll try to prove it to you guys like this. I think every one of us has had a 5-year plan, 10-year plan, right? 10 years ago, you had a plan. And in your mind, you thought, in 10 years, this is what I want my life to look like. And whether you did this intentionally or not, you did this. Subconsciously or consciously. If you're a type A person, you had a planner, you mapped it out. You're like, this is what I need to do every day to reach these goals. Most of us, though, we just said, man, if I could just get a job, get married, get kids, right? Get a car that doesn't break down half the time, right? But what happens is we begin to work that plan. We just do. We work it. The reality is, whether or not you've ever met those goals, most of us don't ever know, because before we get there, we've already exchanged that 10-year plan for a whole nother one. And ultimately, the things that we've been chasing, they don't satisfy. We know they don't satisfy. And I know you know that too, because every 10 years you have a new game plan, right? The problem is what happens is we will work the next plan and the next plan and the next plan and the next plan, and then we will die. We will get painted up like clowns and thrown in the ground. Scary. And almost all of us, whether we want to admit it or not, we bought into the philosophy that what we finally need to make us happy is more of what we already have. And it's madness. It's absolute madness. That's why we shop, right? Because you don't shop because you need something. You shop out of boredom. I mean, most of us. Let's be honest. None of us are buying clothes because ours are just falling apart. Unless you work in the trades. You know, you don't. What we do is we spend $90 on clothes that are already partly falling apart because we think it's cooler. Right? And I'm not saying that's what people do and this is what everyone does. And it's very obvious. It's outright evidence that our lives are boring and predictable and we're stuck in a rut. And so we do these things thinking we can just make it that much easier. Right? We try to numb it and turn it off by acquisition. Solomon's going, dude, I did all that. I did it. And here's the deal. It's meaningless. None of it matters. Okay, why? Why doesn't it matter? And why do we feel that way? Because I'm not the only one. Am I the only one? I might be the only one. Ecclesiastes 3:11 says this: God has placed eternity into our hearts. Okay, this is going to be kind of an abstract idea. Follow me. You guys have heard about the cross-shaped pole and all this stuff. I do believe this is correct. I don't know how else to say this. What that text means, that God has placed eternity into our hearts, is at some weird level, deep down in our souls remember a time before the fall. That our souls, at some real deep level, they've had this experience that has been cut into them, right? Where it remembers what it was like before sin entered into the world. And so we remember at a really deep level what it was like to be full, what it was like to be satisfied, what it was like to not be carrying all this weight around. And our souls, the Bible says, are groaning to get back there. The problem is, the experience our souls remember is shaped like eternity, and everything we try to fill that void with is temporal. It's here, it's on the ground, and we do good jobs though, right? We shove a lot of stuff in there. And we do think that if we can make it bigger, or if we can get something stronger than those temporary fleeting feelings, maybe they can last just a little bit longer, right? And then we'll be okay. And the problem is you're never going to fill it because it's never going to be big enough. And here's the thing. This is what I'm afraid of. Solomon got to the end of his goals, And at the very end, he said, none of it matters. It's all vanity, and we do not possess his resources. And so my fear for us is that we're going to spend the rest of our lives chasing our tail, chasing what we already possess, chasing something that has already not brought us any happiness, only just to die on a treadmill. My absolute favorite story in the Bible is the woman at the well in John chapter 4. The scriptures say that Jesus needed to go to Samaria, despite the fact that no one went through Samaria, especially not Jews. But he comes and he sits at a well, and a woman, it says, comes, a woman of ill repute. She shows up in the middle of the day, because if she came in the morning, she probably would have got beat up. She's like a social outcast. But she shows up in the middle of the day, and Jesus says, hey, will you get me some water? And she goes, okay. She scoops up water for him, a little freaked out that she's talking to him. She gives him water, and Jesus takes the water, and he goes, I'm going to drink this, but after I'm going to get thirsty again. And she's like, you want another cup? He's like, no. But he goes, look, people are going to come here all day. And the women that came here this morning to get water and draw water, they're going to come back tomorrow because they're going to get thirsty again. And then he says this to her. He goes, if you drink the water I'm offering, right? If you drink the water that I'm bringing, you're never going to be thirsty again. And she completely misses it, right? You remember the story. She misses the point. She's like, you don't even have a cup. You're talking about water. You don't have water. This is what Jesus was saying to her, this woman at the well. And this is what he would say to us. I am eternal. I fill the void that your soul remembers. All those people that have taken advantage of you, all the places that we've ran to, that we try to find, some kind of satisfaction in. Things that just leave us feeling worthless and shame. What he's saying is, I feel eternity. He said, David calls me Lord. I've always been. He tells her, come, never be thirsty again. In John 10:10, Jesus says, the thief comes to steal and kill and destroy, but I came that they may have life and have it abundantly. He's saying, look, man, you're living and breathing, but you're not alive. You're not alive. He says, there's life in me. You're existing, but you're not living. You're not thriving. He says, I have come so that you might be what you were created for, that you might have life and have life in an abundance. And then, look, when that happens, all of a sudden, all these things do have value. They do have meaning. All those 6 things, they do matter, right? Now money can just be money. It doesn't have to be our king anymore, right? It doesn't have to be attached to some weird social status. So now with money, I could just give it away, or I could buy a house. It doesn't have to be my king. It doesn't own me. And the Bible tells us Christ comes, he removes the futility and the vanity from the soul, and he brings about the purpose that you and I are just dying for. Because everything else is just, under the sun, it's just a treadmill. That's it. My hope is that we will start to honestly evaluate our life. And that might lead us to look beyond the sun, like Job. And that hopefully we can develop this sixth sense of faith a little bit more fully in our lives. I appreciate you guys. Let's pray. Father, I thank you for these men and women. I thank you for your truth. I thank you that you are not the enemy of pleasure, Lord. You're not the enemy of any of those things. Father, help us to find meaning and value in these things, Lord. Help us to know the desires that you have for our hearts, God. Lord, and thank you so much for all that you're doing, for all that you continue to do, Lord. I know this is a hard one. I know it's hard to swallow, Father. I just pray, Lord, that you would help us as we walk and we frolic under the sun, Lord, that you would help us to find meaning, that we would know that there's nothing here that's going to bring lasting joy. And that we would constantly gaze beyond, Lord, focusing on you, your goodness, and your grace. It's in your beautiful name we pray. Amen. Thanks, guys.